Now Ron's covered a lot of the first module in your notes. Ron talked about the main participants, distributors. So here in Wellington we have Wellington electricity lines. And Ron talked about the 4-character code that's used in the registry. So for Wellington electricity lines, it's CKHK. Where I come from in Christchurch, Orion is the lines company there, the distributor, and their code is ORON. And up in Auckland, it's Vector, VECT. So traders, Genesis, Contact Energy, Meridian, and so on, MEPs, and there's another participant, RGST, and that stands for the registry itself. So when it comes to sending information to participants, if you're sending stuff to the registry, the 4-character code to identify that is RGST. An ICP, as Ron mentioned, it's a point of connection at which electricity is supplied to a consumer. Ron gave a better definition. And in the statistics, there's over 200 million of these. Ron's mentioned the functions of the registry. Now the main ways of connecting to the registry, the first way is to use the web browser interface. So you start up your web browser and you type in the correct URL, and that will bring you to the logon screen so that you can log on to the registry. So that's one way of doing it, and we'll be using that a lot in the exercises today. We will be connecting to a copy of the registry rather than the real registry, so we can play around and do our exercises and we're not going to cause any damage. The other way is to use the FTP interface, and you create a file of information in a CSV format, and you transfer that file to the registry. It gets processed, and if the registry needs to send information to you, it uses this mechanism as well. So the FTP interface, there's a couple of variations on this. There's plain FTP, which is going to be phased out at the end of this year. And there's SFTP, which is a slightly more secure version of FTP. It's in terms of the way that you use it, it's totally transparent to you. But what happens with secure FTP is that all your communication gets encrypted. So even when you connect to the registry, your password and user ID and so on, that's all encrypted, along with all the files that you send to the registry. They get encrypted in transmission. And you may have some kind of back office system that has been programmed to use these, FTP and possibly web services, so that it gets information without you having to use one of the standard interfaces. Okay, and your flash drives that I mentioned before, there's a little black box by your monitors. So if you plug the flash drives into there, when you open up Windows Explorer, you'll find that there's, along with the C drive, there's also another drive called Lexar, which is the flash drive. And if you have a look at the files contained within there, there's actually two directories. One's called course files, and the other is related documents. Now, the course files have got a PDF version of the course notes, so people who like to look at the course notes on screen rather than the printed form, you can do that. The course slides, my presentation here is the course slides.ppt. Ron's presentations are going to be made available on the EA website. And there's a few files, the text files there, that we're going to use in the exercises that will come up later on during the course. The related documents, those are some documents that Ron identified as being particularly useful for the people attending this course. And I'd like to draw your attention to two in particular of those. One is the Registry Functional Specification. Now, that's a marvellous piece of documentation. It's got everything you need to know about ICPs and the way that you transfer file, all the different processes that you could engage in interacting with the registry. And the other important file there is the fields I don't know whether it's actually in that on the slide, but it's certainly on your flash drive, the draft fields file that Ron was demonstrating before. Now, with ICPs, there's lots and lots of fields, lots and lots of pieces of information that you store about an ICP. And there's, in fact, over 100 of them. And Ron's very kindly gone through and listed all of those fields and explain what they're about and the consequences of incorrectly entering information. There's some other very useful things. For instance, list of participant identifiers. Now, that's a spreadsheet that's got the names of all the participants who work with the registry. And in another column, it's got the 4-character code. So if you want to look up the 4-character codes, you could use that spreadsheet. OK, so we'll move on to Module 2, which is about ICPs. And the ICP Identifier, this is constructed in the following way. You have a 10-character, 10-digit code, followed by 2 characters which identify the lines company, the distributor. And then there's a 3-character checksum. Now, there is one of the files in the course files directory on your flash drive is a spreadsheet file that will generate ICPs for us, and we're going to need this for one of the exercises. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the use of that spreadsheet file. So this is my flash drive, and if I go into the course files, there is a Generate ICP spreadsheet. So I'll double-click to get that going. And this spreadsheet has got macros in it. And as a security feature, Microsoft always prevent you from running macros because they're dangerous. But these are safe macros for us, so we can enable that content. So you see the security warning bar along here, click on the Enable Content, and that will mean that the macros can run. Now, to make an ICP, and distributors are the people who make ICPs, you have to think of a number. And obviously, when distributors start making ICPs, they'll start with 1, 2, 3, and so on, incrementing that number. So it's a 10-digit number. So I'll just put in 1. The distributor code. Now, if the EA informs distributors what 2-character code they should be using. For Orion always uses RN, as they've been told to use RN for their ICPs. Vector use LC. But for our purposes today, you can use any 2 letters that you want to. So I'm going to just use my initials, GD. And then if you click on the full ICP Identifier, you'll see that it's generated an ICP number that we can use, a valid ICP number. This checksum, the purpose of the checksum is to ensure that it's a valid ICP. So whenever we get information in the registry, we always validate that the ICP is correct, that it hasn't been, you haven't transposed a couple of the digits, or it hasn't got garbled in transmission. So that's how we generate ICPs using this spreadsheet. Okay, so there's an exercise here for you to fire up that spreadsheet and to generate an ICP. You could be very unlucky with your initials, like suppose your initials happen to be LC. Well, that's going to conflict with all the vector ICPs. So you'll either have to change your name, or you have to think of another two characters to choose, like ZZ or XX. So exercise 1 is to just make an ICP. Exercise 2 is to validate those ICPs. Use the spreadsheet to see if those are valid ICPs. And yes, do that now, please. Yep.